I'm a senior manager at E&Y. I'm part of our financial accounting and advisory services group. I'm an accountant by background and have been working with a number of our clients, particularly in the financial services industry, working through accounting change implementation. So have been fairly familiar with the rigor that needs to come along with accounting change and how that then translates into disclosures and reporting. Over the last couple of years, I've been now turning some of that focus towards the ESG side of things and working with our clients as they have been embarking on their ESG reporting journeys. And this conversation over the next half hour, I'll get into some of the reporting and data considerations that we have been seeing some of our clients think through as they put together this framework for reporting over the next few years. I don't have a disclaimer slide, but I guess I should add that in. This is my opinion and not necessarily that of Ernst & Young's. I am part of our global financial sustainable finance network, which consists of a number of colleagues from around the world. So we do talk a lot about CSRD, NFRD, SEC, all the acronyms that you can think of in the ESG world. And we put out a number of thought leadership materials as well. So I did leave my contact information down here in case anybody is interested. The other direction? Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so with ESG, I think everybody knows it's had its humble beginnings coming from the corporate responsibility reports. It's always focused on what the company is doing in the communities, volunteer initiatives, and over the years, it's really then coalesced around what is important to the company and who are the stakeholders that are looking at this. From an internal perspective, you're looking at as employees and the company's objective itself. And then from an external perspective, investors are starting to pick up on this ESG reporting as over time. So we are hearing a lot more questions about it during investor presentations, and there's a lot more scrutiny in this area, which then, of course, invites the regulatory bodies in this space. So with the SEC having put out a proposal, I guess about 2 years now, March of 2022, that proposal received a number of comments in terms of how industries feel that the cost and the efforts that they will need to do to implement this standard. But nonetheless, there is a number of regulatory bodies that are starting to join in the conversation around ESG reporting, which leads to this alphabet soup, I guess, if you call it, of different ESG frameworks that are out there. Some of them are mandatory, like the CSRD. Some of them are voluntary, like the ISSB, and it depends, which depends on each jurisdiction adopting the framework requirements. But nonetheless, I think there's a lot of regulatory bodies that are jumping into the fray, into this conversation, hoping to put a little bit more rigor and guidelines around ESG reporting. Some of them have significant overlap. Many of them kind of coalesce around the TCFD, which is the Task Force for Climate-related Financial Disclosures. But nonetheless, I think from our clients' perspective, it's kind of been a bit of a whack-a-mole. They were working on SEC, and then CSRD has now looped in some of our U.S. companies because of their involvement in European markets. And then ISSB came out. Now that's something else that they have to think about, whether the jurisdictions that they're operating in will pull them into reporting. And then, of course, Asia Pacific is also coming up with some of their requirements as well. So just a couple of the driving forces for ESG. We have mentioned the investor side of things. EY has put together a survey that's pulled on some of these thoughts from investors in terms of what they're expecting around ESG disclosures. We've got the regulatory body across the United States, across Europe, across Asia. There's also some states that are now putting out specific requirements as well. So the New York Department of Financial Services, for example, came out with something, I think back in 2021, suggesting that financial companies put together some requirements around ESG reporting. The NAIC for insurers have put out a survey that's mandatory to be responded to. And then the state of California more recently came out with some regulations around scope 1, 2, and 3 reporting and the attestation requirements that come about with it. So there's a lot of focus in this area and a lot of overlapping requirements for reporting that I think it's incumbent on companies to kind of work through on their end. And of course, that also leads to some of the internal decision making considerations here. So traditionally, I think this space has always been operated by the chief sustainability officer. They're probably working by themselves or even under risk management to put together these disclosures. And there's been some involvement questions from the board asking what is the company doing around ESG reporting. But more and more, we're seeing that finance is also getting pulled into this as well, considering the attestation requirements that are getting put in around ESG reporting, particularly scope 1 and 2 emissions and scope 3, sometimes if material. It's really helpful to have finance be part of that conversation because they're going to be driving so much of the process controls, data structures, and working across the organization to make sure that the information is being implemented, gathered correctly. So with that, finance also includes internal controls teams, also includes the reporting team, the disclosure team. So you've got a mix of people that are joining in the conversation here. So just to chat really quickly around the SEC requirements here. So like I mentioned, this proposal came out in March of 2022. They have proposed disclosures outside the audited financial statements. So this is what we call the Reg SK requirements, and these are subject to disclosure controls and procedures. And then there's the disclosures that are in the audited financial statements, and these are what we call the Reg SX disclosures, and they're subject to internal control over financial reporting. So the Reg SK requirements, this is very similar to the TCFD. So you've got governance, risk management, strategy, targets and goals / metrics. The disclosure controls and procedures looking at, what's the inventory of policies that support these disclosures, what is the disclosure reporting process around it to make sure that it's going through the right level of approvals, and making sure that in general, there's support behind what is being put out in the public. The Reg SX disclosures, on the other hand, subject to ICFR, these are a little bit more scrutinized. So these would be subject to SOX level controls. And with that, there is a whole, additional level of scrutiny in terms of making sure that the information supporting the public, these public disclosures are auditable, and that they are being traced to source files, and they have more structure around the processes used to collect this data. The proposed assurance noted here for scope 1 and 2, that's the current requirement right now. Scope 3, I think, is facing some significant pushback, although California, I think, has come out and said that they will eventually require assurance over scope 3 emissions. And this is a very difficult space to quantify, to estimate, to even support with assumptions. So I think for now, a lot of our clients are focusing on scope 1 and 2, but they know that scope 3 financed emissions particular is not far behind for them. And then, of course, the timeline right now is a guess for everybody. It was supposed to be, I think, at the end of this year to come into effect for next year. And then it got pushed back, but your guess is as good as mine at this point. And then, of course, around the world, just mentioning the ISSB and the CSRD. Again, just a lot more different companies joining in the conversation. I think on the CSRD front, the EU taxonomy is pushing ahead on the assurance requirements. So it's almost, if you can get out of the assurance requirements on the SEC side because your scope 3 isn't material, you might get scoped in anyways on the CSRD side. So then with all of that, with reporting and disclosures leads to a number of reporting activities to start thinking about. You've got the governance, who's going to be overseeing this, who's going to be pulling together these disclosures, who's going to be responsible, accountable ultimately for the ESG disclosures. Like I mentioned, right now, a lot of this is in sustainability reporting, which, might not have gotten the same level of scrutiny that would be required if this is going to be now have a external auditor to provide an opinion over. You've got the reporting requirements. Like I mentioned, a lot of companies feel like it's whack-a-mole at the moment, but there is a lot of overlap between all of these reporting frameworks, and it's really important to gather what is it that you're going to be subject to, what is it that you're going to be reporting to find those efficiencies and making sure that you're pulling from the same source data. You've got the business integration side of things. So who are the relevant business units for these reporting requirements? I think looking at a number of our clients' organizational charts, there's entities all over the place, offshore, onshore, whatever you call it, and how they roll up into different jurisdictions. So it's important to know who is going to be reporting what at what level, whether it's consolidated or on a unconsolidated basis, and from there, work together to define a number of policies from that perspective. Then you've got the data and technology side of things. I think a lot of our clients are hoping for a bit of a silver bullet that they can find a vendor that will solve all of their ESG problems. And as far as we can see right now, there isn't one in the market, though I think, we do have some vendors who say that they can help estimate the scope 3 emissions. But the big thing here is it really depends on an organization's data. If you have disparate sources, if you don't have good quality data, you're going to get garbage in, garbage out. So it won't really, it doesn't matter, what technology vendor you have at that point. Information communication, this is making sure that the information that you're putting out in the different sources all kind of tie together. So you're saying something in your financial statements and you're saying another thing in your sustainability disclosures that's going to invite some scrutiny, that's going to invite a lot of questions and maybe even from the SEC. Processes and controls, this is a great one, and we've had a lot of spirited discussions with our clients on this. A number of them sometimes have been doing these disclosures off the back of a napkin. I've literally heard of a client who said, we just kind of put together a couple of numbers on Excel and that's our estimate for how much we recycle every year. And that's great. But when it's something that's going to be attested to, you're going to need a little bit more structure around that. Disclosure generation, so the actual putting together these disclosure obligations and having the right level of involvement from the disclosure committees. Some of our clients take several weeks to get these disclosures through, and so this is something so timing becomes a very important aspect. I think for a number of our public clients, you have the financial statements that are issued in February, March, but then their sustainability reporting typically has come in June or July. And so how do you now bridge that gap to get the information pulled into an earlier reporting period? And then finally, the performance measurement aspect of it, all the metrics that you're reporting out, how are you tracking that? How are you measuring yourself against that? And how are you, of course, showing the value, demonstrating the value to investors during your public earnings statements? Oh, seem to be going backwards, sorry. All right, there we go. So then these four topics, if you will, these are what we consider the key considerations and risks associated with disclosing ESG data. I think the data requirements is a really key one. Who is what type of data you're going to be reporting on, and then also the different scores and ratings that you're going to have to pull this into the different risk assessment providers that are going to be involved here. I think there's a number of, it's a good investment to put up some time and think through what those data requirements are. Again, there's a lot of efficiencies that can be gathered here. Then we've got the data integration. So actually pulling this all together, aligning taxonomies, looking at classifications and measurements. A big problem here is that we see a lot of disparate ESG data sources, particularly as you're looking at the various business units. Everybody is pulling from different sources, and what we would all like to see is it's pulling from a single source, like a ledger, right? For example, so if you're looking at emissions by locations, the locations are something that can be tied back to leased assets, for example, and that just helps reduce some of the estimation and some of the uncertainty that goes behind these data sources. But that's easier said than done. Data consistency, so the lack of consistent, reliable data metrics is a problem. This is something that just has not had the investment, I think, in the past in this area, but this is going to be something that will require more structure going forward. And then once you have that all stood up, then the ongoing data governance. Is this going to be a data lake, a data warehouse? Who's going to be looking after this? And making sure that there's no the accuracy, the completeness around that, and it's not being misreported. So a couple of problems and potential recommended practices, and I guess a wish list on the guiding principles on the right hand side here. So of course, spend, sourcing, quality and controls, processing, these are the inefficiencies that we are seeing right now. There is very little a consistent approach to gathering data. Everybody is kind of just putting in inputs as they see fit, but this is something, again, needs that structure. The sourcing, where is it coming from? So there's some external vendors that are providing data, and that's something that I think some companies have bought and purchased over the years. But where are those sources coming from, right? So there's going to be some additional scrutiny here. Quality and controls, how often the data is being reviewed, how often is it being cleansed, how often is somebody kind of recalculating some of the disclosures to make sure that there's accuracy here. These are all kind of controls that we've been helping our clients think through, whether it's something that they want to perform annually, quarterly, biannually. It really depends on their process. And then, of course, the processing, right? The inconsistent data flows. This is, we've done a lot of process mapping with our clients to help them understand where the end-to-end is. And sometimes you can see the steps are bouncing between the company itself and then going to an external provider before it comes back to the company. And that's just where you're inviting a lot of discrepancies in the overall process. And then, of course, the guiding principles, I think this is just, this is a wish list for now, but this is a journey that will take a couple of years to get there. Climate data is sourced once, but leveraged to support multiple use cases. Again, that can only be possible if you have a clear understanding of what is it that you're going to be reporting upfront in the first place. Identifying and leveraging reliable and trusted climate data sources, a lot of mapping work to be done of where existing data is being pulled from and what else is going to be needed. A customized enterprise data management standard for climate data. I think we've heard of, I think SAP coming out with something like this, Workiva, I think mentioning also having a module, but these are potential solutions that can help integrate the data. But again, it really depends on what an enterprise currently has. So. And then, of course, some of the pitfalls to avoid. So having the right people involved in the review of ESG reports. I mentioned that traditionally it's kind of been the CSO office doing this on their own and feeling a little bit isolated maybe from the rest of the reporting procedures, but integrating them into the broader reporting processes has done wonders in terms of opening up their world to the level of structure that is in place and can be leveraged for ESG reporting. Making sure that there's consistent messaging and reporting across various disclosure mediums. So the sustainability report needs to tie to anything that's put on a company website, to what is in the financial statements itself. Lack of uniform definitions and methodologies for critical calculations and key metrics. This is one that we've worked with a lot of our clients to help them define upfront what key terms are going to be. One of my clients said that they had a very long discussion over how to define an employee. And you would think that that's a fairly simple term that everybody can get behind, but with contractors, subcontractors, and offshore, it can be a little bit challenging to exactly define, who is an employee, and then the metrics that come along with that. Disparate non-controlled data underlying the disclosures. Of course, we would all love for this to be a controlled process, all coming from the one ledger, feeding into a one reporting spot. But this is, I think, something that we're still building towards. And then reducing the level of data manipulation in this process. So if there's an automated solution, that would be great. But again, that really depends on the data inputs that are going in the first place. And then inconsistent application of materiality. This is an interesting one. So with CSRD, they're looking at both the financial materiality as well as impact materiality. So what we call a double materiality. Materiality in general, I think, always invites a lot of questions. Can you leverage something that's already been developed by the financial reporting team, by the accountants, or is this something that you have to come up with entirely new for ESG purposes? What is material, carbon emissions? How do you kind of quantify that, both from a qualitative and quantitative perspective? And then, of course, lack of training for key personnel. So again, ESG reporting is something that we see that's organization-wide, and it does take a lot of time to kind of socialize this with people who are both involved in providing the reporting on ESG metrics, but also the ones who are going to be answering to it from an organization leadership perspective. So this is, we see clients consistently adding training to their board meetings, adding training to their quarterly meetings to make sure that all levels are aware of what's going on at the organization around ESG reporting. And so then this is the approach. This is what we see as the key areas of building out an approach to ESG reporting. So the strategy front, this is making sure that you have the right people involved from finance, ESG, human resources, other senior leadership, spending that time to come up with what is in the data strategy, reporting strategy, linking it to internal policies, and setting up a good governance model. So you're in a good place from day one. Then moving over to assessing the controls or lack of controls maybe that exist around ESG reporting. So working with the SOX and controls function, bringing in IT auditors to make sure that systems are operating correctly, determining the metrics process flow. The risk and control matrix development is a really helpful one that we've seen a lot of clients undertake that exercise. Then having a good structured environment for collecting and reporting on your data, and then the eventual reporting itself. So how does all of this then flow from the ESG world over into the public reporting world? So the report inventory, what are you going to be reporting on? Risk ratings, process design, system selections, these are all kind of things that need to come together in order for a comprehensive ESG reporting process. And then this last slide, just a couple of food for thought. This is some of our clients are thinking through what an operating model looks like for ESG, trying to balance, again, that spend and the effort from the company itself. I think many companies are thinking about hiring or putting out a position for an ESG controller, so somebody who has the ESG background, sustainability background, but also has the rigor and understanding from a finance side of things. And so we've helped some clients kind of think through if they were going to outlay capital spend for a technology vendor, is this something that they want to own and run, which is option A, and helping them kind of think through the cost of ownership and the level of client effort that would be involved. A lot of times to implement option A, you're going to be hiring quite a few additional number of people or adding on responsibilities to existing personnel. Option B is client owning the technology, but maybe outsourcing the maintenance and annual reporting to another firm who is much more efficient, maybe at producing these disclosures, knows what to look for, and that helps reduce some of the effort on the client side. Or option C, where they outsource the entire thing out, both the technology solution and the reporting aspect as well. And so having somebody else kind of take care of it. And the key thing to mention here on option C is it's not a set it and forget it option, because I think at the end of the day, you do need to still have ownership over these reporting disclosures and this reporting as well. So clients still need to be involved in assessing what is being pulled together. So we do tell our clients that while, sometimes this might look like the easiest option, it still requires a collaboration between all the different partners. So that's it.